this is just a potpourri of ovarian lesions. I'm not going to focus only on malignancy or tumors alone, and I would focus more on exam-based. I would expect more pathology graduates to take up FRC path as well. I would always encourage them to take up a fellowship exam. So please feel free to ask any questions based on this. Okay, let me move on to the first case. This is from a 48-year-old lady. She presented with a ovarian mass and the radiological findings were suspicious of malignancy. And this particular case was actually sent for frozen. The cyst was multiloculated and it contained chocolate brown material. There were polypoid growths. That's why it was concerned of malignancy. I'll share the slides first because I have to move from one case to another. Sorry, it accidentally got closed, so I have to reopen again. Share it. Okay, would anybody want to volunteer? Okay, this was actually a frozen section slide that was submitted for paraffin. Would anybody volunteer to describe, please?
Postgraduates. Hello, postgraduates.
It was a polypoid lesion. This was actually
ಬರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸೇಮ್ ಕೇಸ್ ನ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಜಯಶ್ರೀಗಂತೂ ಬರಲೇಬೇಕು ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಶಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಡನ್ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್.
Anybody who wants to describe? Hello?
okay.
Section study shows
malignant.
Dilated
Yeah.
glands.
Yes.
Cystically dilated glands.
Yeah.
What is the lining made up of?
Lining is low columnar epithelium.
Sure. Yes.
Any other feature?
Do you think it's benign or malignant?
It's malignant because there is stratification of nucleus.
Okay. Look at the nuclei. They are quite bland, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you see any prominent nucleoli that's staring at you?
Nuclei is present.
No, they are not. Actually, it's very inconspicuous. And as I go through, it would be very hard for you to see any mitosis. You'll hardly see any mitosis here.
Yes.
Okay. And you can also see some cilia on the surface.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see that? To be honest with you all, endometrium, the normal epithelium, is also a ciliated columnar epithelium. So please be careful. Just when you see this stratification, it doesn't really matter. Especially if you're thinking of serous carcinoma, they will lose their cilia when they become serous carcinoma. When they become malignant, they tend to give off their cilia. So that is a clue for us to say whether it's benign or malignant. So the moment you see the cilia, bland nuclei, everything, this is actually a benign condition. So this is called as polypoid endometriosis. This is actually, it was in an endometriotic cyst. The rest of the lining show typical endometriotic cyst features. And this is what is called as polypoid endometriosis. So these are the features which we saw. There was normal endometrial features plus these polypoid growths. They got fibrocellular ovarian stroma, and these are actually endometrial glands. You can't see any significant cytologic atypia. There were not any borderline change or malignancy. So it was called as polypoid endometriosis. This usually, if you think in routine practice, endometriosis is often underdiagnosed, especially in postmenopausal women, because we expect to think endometriosis should always have glands plus stroma. Actually, it's not. Even when you see one or the other components, you can call it as endometriosis. If you do your CD10, if you don't see the stroma clearly, it will pick up in foci or the other. So, but I'm not saying that immunohistochemistry is a must. You have to make a diagnosis on histology. So this polypoid endometriosis, actually it's a rare form of endometriosis. You can have multiple mucosal or serosal masses, and at all times you will see typical non-polypoid endometriosis in the adjacent tissue. Common sites are colon, ovary. I have seen in the colon as well, ovary, and in the omentum. Sometimes you just have this endometriosis within the omentum. They form florid polypoid masses, giving an impression of malignancy. And you should also be aware of this burnt out endometriosis. When the surgeon says it is an endometriotic cyst and you don't see the lining, you don't see the stroma, neither the stroma nor the glands, but be aware that it will be full of hemosiderin laden macrophages, and they tend to form these nodules called as necrotic pseudoxanthomatous nodules. They are not granulomatous inflammation, they are just pseudogranulomas. But when you see the histiocytes will be typically arranged in a palisaded manner. Sometimes you can see this Langerhans rings, but it's quite rare to be seen in a endometriosis. Okay, any doubts on this first case?
Postgraduates, if you have any doubts, you can ask why you can think of endometriosis.
I'll finish up one case before moving on to the other, that's why. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll move on to the second case. She's a 48-year-old lady. She had multiple masses in the abdominal cavity. I'm not saying pertaining to the ovary. This is again another interesting case. Initially, they thought the cystic masses were arising from the ovary. Intra-op, both ovaries were normal. Even grossly, they were normal. Pouch of Douglas tumor was present. So, and then she also had tumor in the rectum. So they clearly labeled that this could be malignancy. And okay. So sorry, every time I have to move on to move. Okay, this was the tumor that was seen. If you could see this, this is the multicystic spaces. This was actually attached to the serosa of uterus.
This one is not shared.
Oh, sharing is it? Sorry. How to share screen? Share screen. Yeah. Okay. If you are you able to see the screen now? This is the uterus, and then you can see this multicystic tumor attached to the serosal surface of the uterus, and the ovaries were normal. Okay, would anybody volunteer?
The screen is not shared again.
Why is it? Okay, here. Anyone?
Endometriosis.
Yes. This was the tumor that was attached to the uterus. You can see foci of adenomyosis here. And this was a cystic lesion. This is what I meant. Sometimes you don't really see the endometrial stroma surrounding them. All you could see is just the glandular lining epithelium. And the first slide, I should have shown you this one first, but I showed the pouch of Douglas, where I could see the endometriotic foci. And hence, this was called as cystic endometriosis. Actually, in cystic endometriosis, you don't really see that stroma that prominent. All you could see is cystic spaces lined by endometrial type of glandular epithelium. So you have to hardly look for this endometriotic foci. It will be somewhere. And as I said, if you see here, it's very difficult to say whether this is endometriosis or am I dealing with the mesothelioma, like multicystic mesothelioma kind of thing. But this was a clue where you can see classic endometriotic foci. Okay, so this lesion is called as cystic endometriosis.
Did you have to confirm with IHC or you just gave up the report like that?
Pardon?
Did you do an IHC or you just gave up the report like that?
Yeah, without IHC, I would always encourage to start hinting your diagnosis based on morphology. If you go to IHC on each and every case, it's very difficult. So it's better to always hit your diagnosis based on histology first. So in this case, if you hunt carefully, you have sampled extensively, definitely you will get the endometriotic foci, as I said. So as you could see here, definitely this was quite convincing endometriosis. Hence, this was called as cystic endometriosis. Okay, this is the one because sometimes endometriosis can form large cystic masses within the pelvis and it can mimic neoplasm most of the times.
Not share the screen again.
Why am I not able to see? Okay, moving on to the third case. This is a 46-year-old lady with left ovarian mass. Whenever for the radiology, when they see masses with necrosis, it's always suspicious of malignancy, right? So this lady, she presented with an adnexal mass and it was about 6 centimeters in largest dimension. If you could see here, this is the ovarian mass. It was fully necrotic and filled with pus. There was no other lesion there. Okay, just bear with me because I have to switch screens. Okay, this was a section from the ovarian mass. Anybody would like to volunteer? It's quite an easy one. Come on. Is it benign or malignant?
Benign.
Neoplastic.
Benign.
Benign, okay. Is it inflammatory or neoplastic?
Neoplastic one.
Non-neoplastic.
Non-neoplastic, okay. What are the cells you're seeing here?
Suppurative.
Yes, it's a suppurative inflammation. As you go around, so definitely you would have made a diagnosis. This is non-neoplastic and it's an inflammatory lesion. So if I just see this amount of suppuration, I would have called it as an abscess. But why should she get an abscess, right? Most of the times, there will be an etiology to it like PID or anything. But as you go along, you see this stuff here. Yes. So this is a actinomycotic abscess. Look at this. So this is an actinomycotic tubo-ovarian abscess. So ovarian involvement in PID is almost secondary to salpingitis. All of us know about that. And they typically present with tubo-ovarian abscess. Usually it's bilateral, but in this case it was unilateral. They will sometimes present with pelvic pain or urinary tract symptoms. Sometimes they'll have vaginal discharge. They can also lead to formation of fistulas. Pelvic actinomycosis is usually a complication of IUD. These kind of actinomycotic colonies are a bit difficult to see unless you have sampled it extensively. Okay, moving on to the next case. This is a 18-year-old girl, and they incidentally found a small ovarian nodule. And again, this case was submitted for frozen section. The tumor markers were negative. Okay, so this is actually a frozen section case. If any of you taking exams, FRC path exams, once you graduate, frozen section is a complete compulsory component, and you have to pass that component before you could graduate, get your fellowship. So this is a frozen section case. This is a incidental ovarian nodule. Would anybody like to describe? Is it neoplastic or non-neoplastic? Every time you approach any tissue, just remind yourself, am I dealing with neoplastic or non-neoplastic lesion?
Neoplastic, ma'am.
Neoplastic. The next thing, once you have considered neoplastic, you should think, is it benign or malignant?
Benign.
Benign.
Malignancy.
So definitely, because the surgeon definitely is going to ask you, are you sure it's benign? So you have to be confident with your diagnosis. So is it benign or malignant?
Benign, ma'am.
Benign.
Malignant. It's very cellular.
It's cellular, yes.
Polymonotonous formation is there, ma'am. The
Good.
cells are-
Monotonous nuclei.
yeah.
It
The
looks
mitosis is there.
What else is happening in the cytoplasm? Is the cytoplasm abundant or scanty?
it is luteinization.
Come again?
Abundant.
Luteinization.
Yes. So what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with okay, we have already thought it's a tumor. We have said it's benign. Are we dealing with a germ cell tumor or some other tumor?
Some other tumor.
Okay, what some other tumor? You have already deleted your germ cell tumor. So what other tumors you would think in this age group? Are you going to think of carcinomas?
Ma'am, maybe lymphomas.
Okay, good thought. Lymphomas. We have already seen the abundant cytoplasm, and if I go carefully, you can see the cytoplasm is actually granular.
Thecomas.
Thecomas, yes, but thecomas in an 18-year-old, I would be skeptical a bit because thecomas are more common in the age group. But you are taking the correct direction. It could be a
Granulosa cell. Granulosa cell tumor.
good granulosa. But what under what category does this granulosa?
Juvenile, ma'am.
Juvenile granulosa cell tumor.
Juvenile granulosa cell tumor.
Juvenile granulosa cell tumor. So what category does this tumor fall under? Is it germ cell tumor or sex cord stromal tumor?
Sex-cord stromal tumor.
So yes, as long as you get a clear diagnosis of this is a sex cord stromal tumor and it's benign, you are safe. You are a competent pathologist. Okay, now moving on. Now we need to further classify this. You have already given the differentials of juvenile granulosa cell tumor, and somebody has mentioned about luteoma, thecoma, and somebody said lymphoma. So definitely it's not lymphoma. With this amount of blanched nuclei, granular eosinophilic cytoplasm, I am ruling out lymphoma. Now we are stuck. Is it juvenile granulosa cell tumor? I'll tell you one important finding in granulosa cell tumor. You have to see nuclear groove. Will you see nuclear grooves in a juvenile granulosa cell tumor?
No, ma'am. No.
ma'am.
Only in adults. Do you see cystic follicle-like spaces in juvenile granulosa cell tumor?
No, ma'am.
Yes, that is a good, actually that is a clue. You always look for cystic spaces. The moment you see cystic follicle-like spaces, think of juvenile granulosa cell tumor, and they will have a bit of pleomorphism. In this case, I don't see any nuclear pleomorphism. And as I go around, you don't see any cystic follicle-like spaces. And can you see the stroma? There's something in the stroma. Actually, this is myxoid. Can you see the bluish tinge to the stroma there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have already said this is sex-cord stromal tumor, and I'm telling you this is not a lymphoma. What are the markers would you do in this case?
Inhibin.
Inhibin. I'm telling you now, inhibin is completely negative. What are the other markers you can proceed in this case? Why I'm stressing chemistry in this case? Because sex-cord stromal tumor, especially, I'll tell you later, it's a common case in FRC path exams. And there's also a component of long cases where you will be given immunos. So you should know what are the immunos. So you have already said inhibin. What are the other sex-cord stromal markers?
TK.
Calretinin.
Calretinin, I am telling you, this is again negative. What are the other markers for sex-cord stromal cell tumor?
WT1.
WT1, it's a bit non-specific. Okay, I'm telling. Okay, in this case it was negative. Go back to what are the proper markers for sex-cord stromal tumor you will think of. The first three markers: inhibin, calretinin, melan A.
SF1.
Melan A. Okay, so melan A was totally positive. If in the sex-cord stromal tumors, we are thinking of two categories here now: Sertoli cell tumor and Leydig cell tumor. Leydig cell tumor will always have hormonal symptoms, unlike Sertoli. Symptoms usually incidental; they don't present with any hormonal symptoms. So in this case, inhibin calretinin was negative, so it's definitely not a Leydig cell tumor. Leydig cell tumor is a common and most popular frozen section case in FRC path exams. So this was not a Leydig cell tumor because they have to be positive for inhibin and calretinin. But in this case, the only tumor I have to support sex-cord stromal is melan A. So I have to proceed with another marker that is specific for Sertoli cell tumor. Any idea which marker is specific for Sertoli cell tumor? Yes, no? So that we can move on to more cases. I still got 7 more cases to go. Come on, guys.
No, ma'am.
Okay, another marker that's specific for Sertoli is beta-catenin. Okay? And androgen receptors you can do, and they will be positive in a sex-cord stromal tumor. Let me show you. Okay, this was my beta-catenin. It showed diffuse nuclear and cytoplasmic positivity. And this is the androgen receptor. You can see strong nuclear positivity for the tumor cells. Okay, If you have to give some brownies, otherwise it's called as pearl points when you're taking up any exam, because it'll actually give you additional marks. Okay, in Sertoli cell tumor, do you have any specific findings that you can put it under your brownie points? I'm just saying for exam sake. In electron microscopy, what feature is classical for Sertoli cell tumor? Any idea?
Prominent Golgi complex.
There is some filaments that is quite peculiar for Sertoli cell tumor. It starts with C. Charcot Botcher filaments. So that one will be under your brownies. It will gain additional points to you. So when you want to write some brownies, you can put it as Sertoli cell tumor, or usually incidental finding. They are usually benign. Just resection is a curative choice of treatment, and electron microscopy findings you can put it down under. And this, when you see a Sertoli Leydig cell tumor, you have to be very careful. That's different from Sertoli cell tumor. If you are dealing with Sertoli Leydig cell tumor, you have to classify them whether it's well, moderate, or poorly differentiated. Okay, but this is only a Sertoli cell tumor. Okay, next. Why am I struggling? So description, these are the markers we can do. As I said, melon A, androgen receptor, beta catenin S100, CD4, SAL4. SAL4 is actually a germ cell marker. MNF116, CD68, because I just thought if I don't want to miss any uncommon granular cell tumor, so CD68 was negative in this case. Okay, next. It's only 4%, usually non-functioning. Incidental findings, they are benign. Next case is a 15-year-old right ovarian tumor. This one, everyone will be jumping at the diagnosis now. It's quite a lobulated tumor. You can see it's got extensive areas of hemorrhage and beige colored cut surface. I'm sure I would expect someone to come forward to describe this case. Okay, 15-year-old girl, solid homogeneous tumor. Tumor markers were negative. Anybody?
Few sheets.
Yeah, sheets of cells.
Pleomorphic.
Yes. What is striking?
Coffee bean appearance.
No, I don't see any nuclear grooves for a coffee bean.
Mitosis.
Yeah. What I'm look at the arrow. Where is it pointing at?
Scanty stoma.
Okay.
Lymphocytic infiltration.
Eosinophilic inclusion.
Prominent nucleoli.
Yes, prominent nucleoli. Very good.
Seminoma-like.
So what do you call that seminoma like in an ovary?
Dysgerminoma.
Terminoma.
Yes. So this is a common tumor, right? Okay, now I would expect you all to give me the markers for dysgerminoma. What are the markers you would do for a dysgerminoma? Please feel free, because not all the students will have the markers.
OCT3-4, ma'am.
Good.
SAL4.
SAL4.
CD117, ma'am.
Very good. Some more.
Nano, FLAP4.
Flap.
Nano G.
Those kind of the nano G, to be honest with you, even in the world, not many places will be using it. So as long as you tell me these four markers, I'm very much happy with you. Okay, what is one marker you would do for all the germ cell tumors? I'm not talking about dysgerminoma, I'm talking about germ cell tumors in general. Give me one marker.
SAL4.
SAL4. Why not OCT3-4? Why not OCT34? Will OCT34 be positive in a yolk sac tumor? Will it be positive or negative? Because you all said SALFO is the most common germ cell marker, right? Why not OCT34? Because OCT34 will be negative in yolk sac tumor, but SALFO will be positive. So it's better to be on the safer side. Use SALFO rather than OCT3/4. Okay. Prognosis. How about the prognosis with this germinoma?
Good prognosis.
Yeah. If it's stage 1A, stage 1A, the capsule is intact. There is the peritoneal washings are clear, no lymphovascular, no need for chemoradiotherapy. You just leave the patient alone. She will do well. Okay, this is my OCT34. Nice, isn't it? Quite nice. Strong nuclear positivity. If you do a AE13, can it be positive or should it be negative in a dysgerminoma?
Positive, ma'am. Patchy positive.
Yes, patchy. Most of the times it's negative, but when you get cytokeratin positivity, don't be taken away. It can still be positive. How about yolk sac tumor? How about the cytokeratins in yolk sac tumor? Will they be positive? Yolk sac tumor will be positive. How about embryonal carcinoma? Will they be positive? This was my SALFO again. This was flat positivity here. Okay. So it's a most common malignant germ cell tumor, though it forms only 1% of malignant ovarian tumors. Not every patient will have elevated PLAP or CA125 or beta HCG. Also be aware when you do a pregnancy test, let's say it's an 18-year-old girl presenting with ovarian tumor, you do a pregnancy test, if it's positive, not necessarily she is pregnant, okay? In embryonal carcinoma and dysgerminoma, you can have positive pregnancy tests because of their beta HCG. So be aware of it. Okay, next. This is a 12-year-old girl, right ovarian tumor. Again, as I said, her hormone markers were all normal. This was a gross. Anybody wants to describe the gross? Or should I move on?
Ruptured capsule.
No, this one after I have cut through the tumor. This is the intact one. What's happening to the surface?
Fat.
Oops, sorry. So quite an intact tumor, but this was a surface growth. And if you could see, they're all papillary projections. Can you see here? So it was a cystic cavity and this was a solid area and it also forms surface papillary growths. I did open it. This is also again another easy case. I'm sure you guys will nail it. Okay. Who wants to describe? Benign, malignant, neoplastic, non-neoplastic.
Benign.
Benign. So it's neoplastic.
The borderline.
Or non-epithelial.
Epithelial.
Good. Among epithelial, serous, mucinous, endometrial.
Serous, ma'am.
Serous, ma'am.
Good.
Serous.
Next, benign, borderline, malignant.
Benign serous is studied.
Benign. Who said? Okay. Anybody would go opt for borderline?
Borderline.
Hierarchical branching, ma'am.
Yes. Good. Very good. Hierarchical branching. These are your epithelial.
Micropapillary, ma'am.
I can't hear. Sorry.
Micropapillary.
No, this is not micropapillary. When will you call it as micropapillary? You have to be very careful when you're using the term micropapillary because it contributes some amount to the prognosis of the patient. You can't use the word micropapillary just like that. You have to be very careful and stringent. Do you have hierarchical branching in a micropapillary?
No, ma'am.
What is actually micropapillary? What do you mean by hierarchical branching?
1 divides 2, 2 divides 4.
Exactly, like it's like a family where you have your father, mother, children kind of thing. So there'll be, whereas in micropapillae, they are not. There'll be just one fibrovascular core and you can see like long papillae. Actually, the papillae should be 4 times taller than its width.
Okay.
So don't be careful when you use the word micropapillae.
Thank you.
And okay, now do you still want to consider benign or borderline, malignant?
Borderline, ma'am.
Borderline.
Benign. Benign.
Borderline. ma'am.
No. What are the criteria for borderline? Anybody? What are you seeing here?
Stratification.
Good. One is stratification.
Here, atypia.
Epithelial tufting. What do you mean by epithelial tufting? Basically, they are getting detached. The epithelial tufts are getting detached from the papillae and they float around. That's it. Okay. Will you call this microinvasion or not?
Yes, ma'am.
What are the criteria for microinvasion?
Less than 1
And 1
mm.
Correct. That is a dimension for calling it as microinvasion. What are the features? Features to call it as microinvasion. Who is suggesting a microinvasion and who is not? If you think it is microinvasion, just let me know what are the findings. Okay, let me point it out. For microinvasion, the cells should be of eosinophilic type. Okay, even it doesn't matter 1 or 2 cells, but it should have abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm, or you should see a cell cluster within empty spaces within the stroma. Only then you should call it as, you should think of microinvasion. If just because these kind of glandular structure sitting in the stroma doesn't make it as microinvasion. Okay, this should have prominent and abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm, or they should be surrounded by empty spaces. But the moment you see micropapillae, please make sure you put that in the interpretation. You can call it as borderline serous tumor / atypical proliferative serous tumor. Full stop. Micropapillae is seen because it amounts to the prognosis of the patient. And you also should be aware when to call it as micropapillary carcinoma. Okay. Let's say I'm seeing features of low-grade carcinoma in this particular tumor, but the focus is measuring less than 1 millimeter. What would you say? Are you going to still call it
Microcarcinoma.
microinvasion or low-grade serous? I'm saying it's still less than 1 millimeter, but the features are so striking that makes me to call it as low-grade serous. Am I going to call it as low-grade serous?
Microcarcinoma.
Are you going to call it as microcarcinoma? Okay. In this situation, the moment you see features strongly supportive of low-grade, though the measurement is less than that for microinvasion, you can still call it as low-grade serous carcinoma. Okay, another scenario, I'm having this, but beware, this is only a 15-year-old girl. Are you going to call it as borderline serous? Is it common to have borderline serous tumor in a 15-year-old girl?
No, ma'am.
Yes, no?
No, ma'am.
No, but can it occur?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So actually this case was called as low-grade serous carcinoma and it came for second opinion, but I call it as only borderline serous. Though you have abundant exophytic growths on the surface of the capsule, it doesn't really make it as low-grade serous carcinoma. Okay, now I'm going to say this case she has implants. What will you look for in the implants? The ovary is borderline serous tumor. I'm saying there are implants in the omentum.
Desmoplasia.
If there is desmoplastic implant, I will still call it as borderline serous tumor. Okay, as I said, I'm not going to put much as on screens because I want you all to actively engage. That's the only reason I'm not going to show many as slides actually. Can occur at younger age, and also as I said for brownie points you can use this. If they occur at a very young age, they are not related to BRCA mutation. Unlike the elderly or adult patients, they are usually associated with BRCA mutation. This is usually more than 5 centimeter. The rest we have already discussed. Less than 5 millimeter, you can still call it as micro-invasive. Okay, implants, you can have non-invasive implants and invasive implants. Non-invasive implants are the one epithelial and desmoplastic. These two doesn't qualify the tumor to be a low-grade serous carcinoma. But the moment you see invasive implants, it equals to low-grade serous carcinoma. So you can ask me, how am I going to call the ovarian tumor as low-grade serous when I'm only seeing this focus as low-grade serous? Still, the ovarian tumor will be called as borderline serous tumor and the omental implants will be called as low-grade serous carcinoma. Do you get it?
Yes, ma'am.
So you still will call the ovary as borderline serous and the implant is equivalent to low-grade serous and the patient will be treated as a low-grade serous carcinoma. How will be a P53 expression in a low-grade serous carcinoma?
Negative to low.
How will you
Wild type.
yes, how will you describe the P53 expression on immunohistochemistry?
Wild type.
What are the two types? Wild type and
Null.
Mutant.
mutant type. In mutant type, you have two.
Null and positive.
Yes, all are none. Either it's all the cells or none. So now for the all, we have a cutoff as 80%.
80%.
So you have to put it as whether you see wild type P53 positivity or mutant type P53 pattern. So in low grade serous, what will be your pattern like?
Wild type.
Wild type. Okay, always remember that though, because those are the those are the points you can get additional marks. That's why I'm just stressing on it. Again, can you have lymph node involvement in serous borderline? Yes, no?
Yes, ma'am.
You can have lymph node involvement, but does it make it as metastatic?
No, ma'am.
No. It will still be staged N1, but you should tell the clinician, though it's staged N1, it's not a metastatic disease. I know this is a bit of a confusing entity when it comes to the serous and mucinous tumors of ovary. It's really very much confusing, but we have to educate the clinicians saying that, look, I have staged it as N1, but doesn't mean it's metastasis, okay? Unless you see classical low-grade serous features, yes, then you can call it as metastatic. Okay, moving on to next case. I wish I had 2 screens. Okay, next case is a 46-year-old lady, large complex right ovarian cyst. And again, another piece of cake question. She had a multiloculated cystic cavity and there was a focal solid fibrous area. I'm not sure if I have picture to this. Okay, it was a quite huge tumor full of mucin. Each and every locule contained mucin. I hate grossing mucinous specimens, to be honest. It just makes the place messy and it slides. Okay. So I'm sure when I said each and every locule filled with mucin, you all would have made a diagnosis. It is a
Mucinous cyst.
Mucinous with Brenner component.
You have already seen. Wait first. What is a mucinous? What happens to the mucin? Is this cystadenoma or benign borderline malignant?
Now it looks benign.
Benign.
Okay, so it's still a mucinous cystadenoma for now. Okay, I'm just going to move around. Very classical, right?
Brenner.
Brenner components. And Brenner can also have mucinous lining within them, okay? Okay. Still keeping on to benign or more than benign?
Benign.
Still benign. I'm seeing something here.
Goblet cells.
That's okay.
Intestinal attack.
I'm showing the mitosis here. There's a bit of stratification. There is mitosis.
Borderline.
Okay. The moment you see, can you see mitosis in a mucinous cystadenoma?
No.
Okay. The moment you see mitosis, you have to be a bit careful. Actually, there are more sections to this. As you all know, I would have taken definitely more sections. So this one can no longer be a cystadenoma. So it was actually a borderline tumor, mucinous tumor. So it was a coexisting borderline mucinous tumor with Brenner tumor. Okay, it's quite a common occurrence, isn't it? Mucinous and Brenner, they go hand in hand together. So the moment you see, when you're grossing, whenever you see a solid fibrous component, please make sure you sample from that area. And I'm sure most of the times you will see a Brenner component there. I shouldn't close this. Okay, markers, it's not necessary, but you can, if in the exams, you can put there like Brenner tumor will be positive for GATA3, P63, Europe, number Madeleine, and AR. Please note Brenner tumor are ER/PR negative, whereas malignant Brenner, the transitional cell carcinoma can be positive focally for ER and PR, whereas Brenner tumor, they are negative. Okay, will Paxate be positive in a mucinous tumor of ovary?
Yes, ma'am.
Can Paxate be positive in mucinous?
Yes, ma'am.
Which type of mucinous? How will you classify the mucinous tumors of ovary? What are the 2 different types?
Cervical and intestinal.
Okay, endocervical and intestinal type. I did a Pax8 and I'm telling you it was an intestinal type of mucinous. So I did a Pax8 and my Pax8 was negative. My CK7 is positive. CK20 is positive. CDX2 is positive. Now, Is it still?
Intestinal origin.
That's why I raised this question. Please be careful. PAX8 in mucinous tumors in almost all the cases are negative, even though it's a primary ovarian tumor. Endocervical mucinous tumors can be positive for PAX8. I'm saying only can be positive for PAX8, but most of the intestinal cases will be negative for PAX8. So that's a trap. So you have to be careful. So you have to write there as usual. We will write intestinal has to be ruled out. And in this case, the intestine, the colorectal was completely clear. The appendix also was clear. So still it's a primary mucinous. Why I'm saying, remember PAX8 can be negative in a primary ovarian tumor. Next case, 68-year-old lady, left ovarian mass. As you could see here, it was a collapsed left cystic mass and the left ovary grossly appeared normal.
Screen is not sharing.
Okay, from the gross, what are the things you should think? So small, the ovarian tumor. So what are the things you should think? Where while you're grossing, you should think of something
Screen
else.
not shared, ma'am.
Screen is not sharing.
Metastasis.
Sorry. 68-year-old lady, left ovarian mass. This how big is a ovarian mass? It's cystic, it's collapsed because of course itchy fingers of the surgeons, they sometimes want to try to open it up to see what's inside. What will you think when you're grossing the specimen? When you're starting with this, what should you think? Can a mucinous be this small? You have to think. If at all it's a mucinous cystadenoma, the wall will actually be thin. It won't be thick. In this case, even you can appreciate on the gross, it's quite thick.
Is it fallopian tube?
The fallopian tube is quite clean. It's here. Okay, let's move on. Case 1. As I said, what did I say? The right ovary looked completely normal to me on gross, except for the left small cystic ovarian mass, and the wall was thick. This was from the right ovary. Any volunteers? Benign neoplastic? Neoplastic, non-neoplastic?
Neoplastic.
Neoplastic. Benign malignant?
Benign neoplastic.
Malignant.
Why do you say malignant? Why did you say malignant? I'm still saying only a single layer one. I'm not seeing any stratification, no mitosis.
Little atypia is there.
If you capture for this matter, when you said atypia, next time when you see a mucinous cystadenoma, look around, you will still see some atypia. Okay. Never mind, we just keep moving on. So it's in between benign malignant. This ovary grossly I thought to be normal ovary. I thought the follicles, it was just cystic follicles. But to my surprise, this is what I saw. Now for me here it's atypical. I can see
atypia is there.
Right? I saw something.
Myxoid areas. Micro invasion.
Oh, you're thinking of malignancy. Okay, we'll hold on here. So we have seen serous mucinous.
Serous.
It was actually mucinous. I can't find the proper mucinous here. Can you see the goblet cells here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it is actually a mucinous. Okay, so you have seen this is a right ovary. I'm going to move on to the next. Okay, this was the cystic ovary. Benign borderline malignant. You can still see the goblet cells though. These are the goblet cells you can see.
A borderline.
Borderline. Okay, so we are still sticking on to borderline in this, and you have already called the other ovary malignant, okay? Okay, now, this is just from the same ovary, since you have seen already. I would have put some marks somewhere. So it's almost like intraepithelial carcinoma, right? So this, we are just leaving it here. So we have called the left one as borderline, the right one as malignant. These were the omental tissue that was submitted.
Implants.
We have already called the ovarian tumors as mucinous. So mucinous, can mucinous have implants? So never mind, we'll stop here. We are still seeing glands. So there is something metastasis, okay? We are not dealing with serous. We have already said both the tumors are mucinous. We have seen the goblet cells as well in both the ovaries, okay? So forget about the serous part. And you're seeing these kind of small glands with very quite an amount of desmoplastic response in the surrounding stroma. Okay, now what is the next question you should ask yourself?
Is it origin from the peritoneal?
Syndrome. Any syndromes?
Pardon?
Peritoneal origin?
Metastasis.
Is it a primary or secondary?
Exactly, whether it's primary or secondary. Will you suspect secondary in this case, and why? If you are suspecting secondary in this case, you should question yourself, why am I suspecting secondary in this case? What is
Bilateral ovarian involvement.
bilateral ovarian involvement, one thing?
Lynch syndrome.
Age.
No, leave out the syndrome. Now we have to figure out whether am I dealing with a primary ovarian tumor or a secondary ovarian tumor. That's the most important thing. So now we have already decided I should also think of secondaries in this case. So metastatic, what are the points to support yourself that you are?
Implants. Bilateral.
Bilateral, and you also got omental metastasis.
Mental metastasis.
Okay. Now I'll ask you all one question. How will the primary ovarian tumors, how will they behave? Mucinous tumors. What are the types they exhibit? Histological types. Apart from endocervical and mucinous, to be more specific, what will be the pattern of involvement, pattern of infiltration?
Unilateral.
No. We have already decided. Now I am saying endocervical and intestinal type of mucinous. How will be the pattern, the architectural pattern for primary ovarian mucinous? How will be the pattern? You know, there are two patterns, expansile pattern and infiltrative pattern.
Expansile pattern of invasion, ma'am.
Okay. When we saw here, is it expansile or infiltrative?
More of infiltration.
Infiltrative, yes, more of infiltrative. Let me tell you one thing, 80 to 90% of ovarian mucinous tumors, primary ovarian, they are of expansile type. It is very difficult to distinguish between a borderline mucinous versus expansile type of invasion. When you are going to call it as expansile type, make sure there is definitely no stroma at all between two mucinous glands. There will be crowding of mucinous glands, but you should not see any stroma. Even if you see a little bit of stroma, take a step back. Whether you're going to call it as well-differentiated mucinous or not, you just have to take a step back. You should not see any stroma in between the glands. Only then you should think of well-differentiated mucinous, okay? Otherwise, stick on to your borderline mucinous. So in this case, when I called up the surgeon, he said all the investigations were done, and he said there are no masses elsewhere. But I told him, no, definitely this is metastasis, and I told them to go and look for the pancreas. Usually this kind of pattern, if you see this kind of pattern, very small glands, if you see it's like very well differentiated, not much of pleomorphism, always remind yourself, pancreas, usually clinicians will miss out the pancreas. You have to remind them, did you look into the pancreas? So I told them, can you please go and check out the pancreas? Then they said, no masses. I said, could you please go and investigate? And then true enough, this lady had a pancreatic mass, and it was primary from the pancreas mets to the ovary. So always remember, bilateral ovarian mucinous with this kind of infiltrative pattern, remind yourself, you should also think of metastasis from elsewhere rather than calling it as primary. If you think about appendiceal mucinous, usually we'll say, right, colorectal and appendix has to be excluded first. They will still maintain the mucinous pattern. And what is one marker that will help you to say this is from, this is from colorectal and not ovary? Tell me one marker, histochemical marker.
Paxate.
I just told you, don't use Paxate. It's not going to help you to differentiate primary ovary versus metastatic. It will not help you. Don't think of Paxate. Don't think of CK7. Don't think of CK20. Because primary ovarian mucinous will be positive for CK7 and CK20. Pardon? Somebody said
CDX2.
Primary ovarian mucinous tumors will be positive for CDX2 because most of the time they are of intestinal type and they will be positive for CDX2, even primary ovarian mucinous. So it's not going to help you.
Ma'am, SAT-B2?
SAT-B2 is the only marker that will help you. Okay. So if SAT-B2 is negative, you should also, as I said, think of pancreatobiliary, especially in case of well-differentiated tumors. Always think of pancreatobiliary as well. Okay. Any questions on mucinous here? If not, I am going to move on to the next. So in this case, I left a comment like this. There's a moderately differentiated adenocarcinoma involving both the ovaries. Appearances are of mucinous type. Momentum and rectum shows metastatic adenocarcinoma. Given the bilateral involvement of ovaries with a possible mucinous phenotype, it's better to exclude a mets from elsewhere. But I already called up the surgeon. I said, you have to look up into your pancreatobiliary as well. And you put there, you always make sure leave a comment to protect yourself. So mucinous carcinoma, primary or metastatic, majority of primary ovarian tumors are unilateral, bilateral have to rule out mets. As I said, expansile type and infiltrative type. And infiltrative type is very, very rare, but you do see infiltrative type. I'm not saying you don't see. CK7, CK20, 19-9 and CDX2 will be positive even though it's a primary mucinous ovarian carcinoma. So you have to be very careful. As I said, Paxate, focal and weak. This focal and weak positivity you will get only in endocervical type and not in intestinal type. And also remember, if you have seen a teratoma with a mucinous tumor and you're doing a SAT-B2, it will be positive. So that doesn't make it metastatic. Be careful with this. This is a trap actually. This can be positive in a mature teratoma. Okay, metastatic mucinous, Krukenberg is quite easy because they'll be very fibrous and you can see loads of signet ring cells forming diffuse sheets of poorly differentiated cells. So Krukenberg will never cause difficulty when it's metastatic to ovary, unlike colorectal and pancreatobiliary primary. Mucinous is again simple. Oh, one more thing I have forgotten to tell you. Whenever a mucinous adenocarcinoma mets to ovary, please remember they can be purely benign looking, they can be purely borderline looking. Not always you will have an invasive component. So just because bilaterality with mucinous histidinoma or borderline tumors still suggests them to rule out mets. Okay, they can be purely benign and they can be purely borderline looking. But as long as it's bilateral mucinous, think of metastasis. As I said, immunohistochemistry may be helpful, but not. Can I ask one question? Let's say you're thinking of pancreatobiliary. What are the other markers will you do apart from CK7, CK20, CDX2C?
Ma'am, napsinate.
Why napsinate? Napsinate can be positive or negative in pancreatic. Anybody? Can be positive as well. So the other markers that can help you to differentiate is MUC1 and MUC2. If you have an opportunity, you can read up on that. MUC1 and MUC2. MUC2 will be positive in pancreatic. Okay. Next case. It's a 59-year-old lady. Again, her markers were elevated and the differentials were mucinous ovarian carcinoma. Let's go back. So they thought it was purely a tumor of ovary. So they have done everything Taxol plus omentectomy plus lymphadenectomy. And I'm showing this is the tumor that I saw from the ovary. Anybody? Neoplastic? Non-neoplastic?
Neoplastic.
Neoplastic. Nobody will dare to say non-neoplastic. Benign malignant?
Malignant.
Okay, benign malignant. Yes, malignant. Epithelial, non-epithelial?
Epithelial.
Serous mucinous endometrioid clear cell?
Endometrioid.
Endometrioid.
Good, great, fantastic. So we have said this is carcinoma of ovary, endometrioid. Grading?
Grade 2.
Grade 2. Why grade 2? All I'm seeing here is only glands, but I don't see any solid areas. Why grade 2? Is the architectural pattern of grade 2? Yes, no?
No, ma'am.
No. So when will you upgrade an endometrioid carcinoma from 1 to 2 based on cytological features, right? When you see the cytological atypia of grade 3 in a grade 1 tumor, only then you switch it to grade 2. For me, this is not marked. This is not a grade 3 nuclei. Agree?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's still grade 1. Okay. We have already concluded that the ovarian tumor is malignant endometrioid. This is the endometrium, okay? Normal endometrium, abnormal?
Hyperplasia. Abnormal.
Abnormal. Hyperplastic?
Yes, ma'am.
Complex, simple?
Complex.
Complex with atypia.
Yes, complex with atypia. So based on
Elevation.
we have already decided there's something happening in the endometrium. And there was also a polyp. This is a sessile endometrial polyp.
Scoring artifact.
Still complex or more than that?
More than complex.
Malignant, ma'am.
So this is a, are you going
Malignant.
malignant? For me, this is already malignant.
Malignancy.
So this is another carcinoma of endometrium. Now the surgeon is asking you, you are telling me there is carcinoma of ovary, there is carcinoma of endometrium. Is it one met to the other or synchronous?
Synchronous.
Anybody? Please answer my question.
Synchronous, ma'am.
Why do you call it a synchronous?
Myometrial invasion.
What about the myometrium invasion? Come on, come on. Yes, you are going on in the right track. why myometrial invasion? Correct, but tell me why.
In synchronous, there will not be myometrial invasion of more than half.
Well done, yes. What are the other criteria? Can you tell me, enlighten me more on further criteria why you're calling it asynchronous? One is myometrial involvement, fantastic. What are the other findings? To support yourself, you have to support yourself, right?
Okay.
Anybody?
No lymphovascular involvement in either of the tumor, ma'am.
Good, one, yeah, no lymphovascular.
Low grade also. Maybe if it's low grade, we think of synchronous.
Both tumors will be low grade, ma'am.
Which tumors will be low grade? Okay, I'm sharing this just to distract you. Sorry for the interruption. This was the first ovary I showed you. This was from one of the ovaries. I can't remember. The other ovary was endometrioid as well. And this ovary was endometrioid. What's happening here? This is
Ma'am, clear cell change.
what's happening here?
Clear cell change.
Yeah. So what is this? There's also a few other sections showed another component. So what would you think of? Would you think of mixed tumor?
Yes.
Yeah, this was actually a mixed endometrioid and clear cell. One ovary had mixed endometrioid and clear cell. The other ovary had endometrioid alone. And there was also complex hyperplasia plus adenocarcinoma. So for you to call it synchronous, you should be, the involvement of myometrium is less than half. There is no lymphovascular invasion. Another feature to support yourself, you also saw background complex atypical hyperplasia, right? And this focus was positive for napsin. And also I would like to stress endometrial carcinomas with clear cell differentiation, if they are very florid clear cell differentiation, they usually won't show this amount of pleomorphism in an endometrioid carcinoma. I mean endometrioid carcinoma with clear cell differentiation. They won't have this amount of pleomorphism. They'll be very nice clear cells. But beware, they also can express napsin A positivity. But here you can still see the pleomorphism, and I really had clear-cut clear cell carcinoma in the other sections. Okay. Okay, this is a good article on how to differentiate primary tumors of. Okay, why should we say whether it's synchronous or whether it's metastatic? Does it really matter? Does it matter? Why should we give so much importance to decide whether it's synchronous tumor or metastatic tumor? Anyone?
Treatment, ma'am.
Pardon?
Lymph node involvement will be there.
Staging of the disease.
Not all tumors will have lymph node involvement, right? So that is not a criteria. What I'm trying
Ma'am, staging.
Yeah, staging. So the staging will definitely differ and matters a lot in the treatment of the patient. When I say synchronous, when it's confined to the ovary, when it's confined to the endometrium, is the patient going to receive any chemotherapy? She's not going to receive treatment because it's still stage 1A. So they'll just leave the patient alone. But the moment you say one metastatic to another, you're subjecting the patient unnecessarily to chemotherapies. So this is a nice article. As I mentioned, synchronous primary tumors of endometrium, when to call it as a few criteria: histologic similarity, large endometrial tumors. This is not actually, you can have both as like big tumors. background endometrium. If it shows hyperplasia, it supports your diagnosis. For you to say metastasis, you should see deep myometrial invasion, a direct extension to the adnexa, or vascular space invasion. There will be spread elsewhere, such as lymph nodes, everything. And ovarian tumor, okay. There are many criteria. You can go through it later. I can share this with you. And as I said, I was thinking about something just now. Okay, one more thing. When you see a predominant tumor in the ovary, you also see in the endometrium. But there is no background hyperplasia. I'm saying there is tumor in the endometrium. There is tumor in the ovary. There is no background hyperplasia. But the uterine tumor is still confined to inner half. And the surgeon is asking you, is it mets from ovary or mets from uterus? Because she also got nodal involvement. Remember, she got nodal involvement. She got a tumor in the ovary. She got tumor in the uterus. Which one will you prefer? Will you prefer ovary to uterus or uterus to ovary?
Ovary to uterus.
Stromal involvement in the ovary we will look for.
No, the stroma in the uterus is less than half. As I said, it's less than half.
Stroma in the ovary.
Pardon? I can't hear you. Sorry.
Ovarian stromal involvement.
No. My question is, which one will you put it as primary?
Ovary, ma'am.
Why? Why not uterus?
Because there should be some hyperplasia in the uterus, ma'am, or any other atypical changes.
Correct.
Other lesions should be there.
Correct. One more thing I would stress here, even it doesn't support you, try to put it as, because uterus, or if there is a tumor in the ovary, uterus doesn't really, if it is not more than half of the myometrium, it doesn't spread elsewhere like that. It doesn't spread to lymph nodes. Not necessarily. I have seen even grade 1 tumors with extensive metastasis to lymph nodes. But in this case, try to make the ovarian as primary. Usually ovarian is the one that behaves like that. And another importance is that they can get immunotherapy treatment. Whereas if you are going to put it as only endometrial, they are not eligible for immunotherapy. So it's better to call the primary as ovary rather than as uterus, since it's already stage 3. Okay, next case. Prama, do you all want to take a break or we can continue? I don't want to confuse you all with more cases.
I will continue.
Okay, this is a 50-year-old lady with a left ovarian tumor. They took the tumor out like this. Sorry, I didn't take a cut surface of the tumor, but just trust me, the surface was covered with extensive myxoid material. On sectioning, it was a unilocular cyst with pultaceous material of a teratoma, and there was also a solid area containing mucinous material. Okay. I think someone can explain this. What do you all think? Neoplastic, right?
Squamous epithelium.
Okay, no doubt about the neoplasia. You got squamous epithelium, correct? You got calcifications, you got fats.
Use in a slide.
Different germ cells, hair follicles,
Yeah.
Calcification,
glands.
Yeah.
adipocytes.
So
From
what's,
all 3 germ cells.
what's this tumor?
Teratoma.
Teratoma. Mature, benign mature cystic.
Okay, mature cystic teratoma. As I said, this tumor also had
Calcification, solid area.
Myxoid mucinous.
same. Yes. What is this?
Yes.
Mucinous.
If I do SAT B2, will it be positive or negative?
Negative.
SAD B2
Positive.
in a teratoma.
Positive, ma'am.
You all right. Okay, come on. Benign, borderline, malignant.
Malignant.
Why malignant?
Mixed. Benign.
Benign.
Who said benign? Do you want to revise your diagnosis from benign?
Borderline, ma'am.
Look at this, mitosis here, mitosis here. There is some amount of stratification.
Borderline.
Borderline.
Borderline, okay? I'm seeing closely packed glands. Does this make it as invasion?
No, ma'am.
Why? When will you call it as expansile type? Can you see the stroma here?
There is absolutely no stroma.
Just now we discussed about expansile and infiltrative. And I said expansile type, the closely packed glands will be there. What you shouldn't see in that?
Stroma
Stroma.
in the glands.
Gland should be opposed.
Stroma at all.
Even this amount of stroma does not make it malignant. Please be careful. How crowded they are. If you see this amount of stroma, don't call it as malignant. It's still borderline. Okay, you should not see any stroma at all in between these glands. Okay, so we are sticking to borderline, right? So it was a borderline mucinous tumor within a teratoma. Okay, it doesn't stop here. We saw something on the surface. Yes or no? The surface of the ovary was covered with
Gelatinous material.
gelatinous material. Okay, what structure is this?
Fallopian tube.
Who said fallopian tube?
Colonic mucosa.
Appendix, okay? This was
Appendix.
an appendix.
Appendix.
What's happening to the wall of the appendix here? What's happening here?
Mucin.
Mucin, it's tracking in between the,
Low grade.
okay. No, for low grade appendiceal, do you see any changes in the appendicular mucosa here?
No, ma'am.
No, so it's not a mucinous neoplasm of the appendix. All I'm showing is the serosa is completely tracked with mucin, and she had abundant mucinous material within her abdominal cavity when they opened up. Okay, she has extensive mucinous material in the peritoneal cavity. So this one, are you seeing any neoplastic cells here?
No.
Okay, what will you think of in this condition? You're seeing mucin in the appendicular wall, and I also show you. This was the omental tissue that was submitted to me. Look, what's happening here? What substance? What's this substance?
Mixed soil.
Mucin. Mucin.
So what will you be thinking of when you see slides like this? What will you be thinking of?
Signet cells.
Immediately somebody will be jumping. Oh, could it be a pseudomyxoma peritonei? Would you be thinking about it or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
What are the criteria to call it a pseudomyxoma peritonei? Any idea? Sorry. Even the washings were full of mucin. I didn't put the cytology slides, but trust me, it was full of mucin on the slides. We also got pseudomyxoma ovariae, right? You got pseudomyxoma peritonei, you got PMP, you got PMO, but I'm saying this is not, because I'm not at all seeing any neoplastic epithelium within them, and it's actually called as peritoneal mucinosis. Okay, there is a grading actually for this. If you will think about this, the pseudomyxoma peritonei has already been divided into two groups. Either you call it as disseminated peritoneal adenomucinosis or peritoneal mucinous carcinomatosis. Okay, and this DPAM, they will still have mucinous epithelial cells. And again, they got a grading. When you see only acellular mucin, like what we saw was full of acellular mucin pools. And you also got this low-grade mucinous carcinoma peritonei, high-grade mucinous carcinoma peritonei, and again with signatory cells. But in our case, this was only a peritoneal mucinosis because you just saw acellular mucin with no mucinous tumor cells at all. And the patient is doing well. She subsequently had intestinal resection, but anyway, she's doing well now. Next case. This is extremely difficult case. I'm not expecting you all to diagnose straight away, but it would be nice to trigger and put some thoughts into this tumor. Again, this is a 11-year-old girl with left ovarian tumor. Tumor markers were completely normal. Okay. I'll also show you the gross. This was the gross. From the gross, what will you think? I'm saying it's a 11-year-old and this is a gross picture. Can someone give differentials?
Embryonal.
Hemorrhagic.
Germ cell.
Variegated appearance.
Give me some differentials. Whenever I was trained and I was taught this way by my teachers. Whenever you are grossing a specimen,
Yolk sac tumor.
diagnosis. Basically, you have to leave it in a broad category. Don't narrow it down based on gross. Don't narrow it down, but you should have a broad category and a diagnosis in your mind.
Embryonal carcinoma.
Germ cell tumors,
don't narrow down your diagnosis based on gross. Just leave it as what are the things you think of. Okay, germ cell. Yes, germ cell tumor should come first in your thought. Dr. Vijayashree, do we still have time?
Yeah, we still have time.
Hope I'm not running out of it.
We still have time. Getting late for you.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, guys. This is ovarian tumor. So I'm just basically going to run through what we have already learned in few cases that we have already discussed. Okay, I just want someone to describe it first. Just few words would do.
Embryonal. That's neoplastic.
Yeah, always make sure neoplastic, benign, malignant. Of course,
Malignant.
all germ cell tumors are malignant. Okay, but I'm not saying this is a germ cell tumor. We are just going to go, how to say, like stepwise, how to approach a tumor. Could someone describe? Again, sheets of cells, or shall I describe?
Arranged in sheets, ma'am.
Okay.
With a moderate to abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm.
Okay.
Round to oval nuclei and prominent nucleoli, ma'am.
Only when I zoom it, you will have prominent nucleoli. Is the nucleoli
Inconspicuous.
Okay, inconspicuous nucleoli. Can you make out the cytoplasmic borders?
Yes, ma'am.
Really?
No, ma'am.
Not really. You have to have like crisp thing. Only then you can say distinct cytoplasmic borders. That's fine. Keep going on. What? We have already seen a dysgerminoma, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it anyway remind you of dysgerminoma?
Yes, madam.
The nuclear features.
Nucleus, ma'am.
Yes, no. We saw something in the dysgerminoma nuclei, which we are not seeing here.
Nucleoli. Prominent nucleoli.
Dysgerminoma will have a prominent nucleoli. We are not seeing that here. And it's in sheets. What's happening here?
Mixoid change, ma'am, or
Yes, mixoid change.
or insular different pattern, ma'am.
Yeah, sort of. Okay, let's say sort of.
Blood vessels.
So we have seen small cells. Is it moderately small, right? Small to medium. They are not really pleomorphic. Like we saw the dysgerminoma, it was quite huge nuclei, prominent nucleoli. Whereas here they are about small to medium-sized cells. And here I can see the nucleoli. Can you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So you got one population, you don't see under this power, I can see the prominent nucleoli that's staring at me, whereas some of the cells, they are not showing any nucleoli. Okay. So throughout it's like that. As we see, there is amount of mucin, stroma. What is this?
Eosinophilic inclusions.
What is this called?
Secretions.
Do they look like cystic spaces, follicle-like spaces? Again here,
Colexner board.
Colexner bodies.
not collexner. Collexner will be very smallish, and they won't have spaces like this. They're not like cystically dilated spaces. This, I said cystical follicle-like spaces.
Juvenile, ma'am.
So I said, if you see this kind of spaces, you have to think of juvenile granulosa tumor. Okay, and again, you won't see nuclear grooves, right, in juvenile GCT. So you
Yes,
don't see any grooves. What are the markers you want? You tell me the markers, I'll tell you whether it was positive or negative. So we have already revised the sex cord stromal. So you all should be able to tell me what are the markers you would like. If you are thinking of sex cord stromal tumor, we have already included this is germinal tumor, and I'll tell you why. My OCT4 was negative, SLAC was negative, CD117 was negative, cytokeratins negative, alpha fetoprotein was negative, my CD30 was negative, EMA was also negative. So I have already ruled out germ cell tumor by all these markers. Now I'm saying, if you are thinking of sex cord stromal tumor, what markers will you ask me?
Androgen markers.
Okay, I'm telling you AR is negative. What are the first few markers? What are the first few markers will you ask if it's a sex cord stromal? Androgen receptor as the least. You have to pick the first.
Inhibin, ma'am.
Inhibin.
Okay, inhibin was negative. What are the other markers?
Calretinine.
Calretinine.
Again negative. What is the other?
LNA.
Na is also negative, so that rules out a juvenile granulosa cell tumor, right? But definitely this is malignant, and definitely it's not a germ cell tumor. Now we are saying that it's not a sex cord stromal tumor, but we're still thinking it's malignant, right? We haven't diverted ourselves from the malignant pathway. We are still thinking it is a primary ovarian tumor and it's a malignant tumor. Okay, now I'm telling you, because this thing was taught to me by Nafisa Wilkinson. She is a gynae pathologist. If you can Google, she has already written few books. Excellent gynae pathologist. She used to tell me, if you see these kind of spaces in the cellular tumor, think of only two tumors. One is juvenile granulosa cell tumor, and the other tumor is small cell carcinoma or hypercalcemic type. These are, if you read in the books, these will be under your miscellaneous tumors. So small cell carcinoma or hypercalcemic type. So if the next question you'll ask me, right? Oh, does this patient have hypercalcemia? I'm telling you, no, the patient didn't have hypercalcemia, because I have already asked the surgeon. He said no, and they didn't think of it, so they never did a calcium level. Anyway, she didn't present with symptoms of hypercalcemia, so it was negative. Okay, it's quite a difficult case, but why I'm trying to stress, you might see once in a blue moon, but the moment you see these kind of spaces, and where was the other thing? And this amount of mucin tracking between the cells, think of small cell carcinoma hypercalcemic type in your dictionary, because it's quite rare to get in 11-year-old. It's usually common in age group around 40ish women, but it can occur as young as 7 months old child. So it's something like a Wilms tumor. They can occur very early, and the markers that are going to help you is This is Wilms tumor marker, WT1. How is the expression? Positive, negative? WT1 positive or negative?
Negative.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Positive.
Positive, negative?
Negative, ma'am.
Positive. Why did you say negative? All these are nuclear stain. WT1 is a nuclear marker, right? And look, each and every tumor cell is picking up.
Positive.
So this is positive. Okay, WT1 is diffusely positive. This marker will help. Usually these tumors are positive for inhibin calretinin as well, but in this case it was negative. If at all it's positive, it's only very patchy. They are not like striking positivity. This was CD99. I don't really believe in CD99. It will pick up almost all tumors. 99% of tumors it will pick up. The only tumor in which CD99 is useful. Can anybody tell me which tumor CD99 is extremely helpful? It has become quite a non-specific marker. Tell me one tumor. If it's negative, you can assure yourself you are guiding in the right direction. I'm completely diverting you all. If I say head and neck, and this one tumor has to be a marker has to be negative in that particular tumor. Any idea? CD99 should be negative in that one particular tumor. Yeah, someone did mention that. What's that?
Neuroblastoma.
Yes. Neuroblastoma, you can have 99 markers positive. That one marker that has to be negative is CD99. It has to be negative. It can never be positive in neuroblastoma. Okay, but anyway, in the rest of the areas, I'll consider it a non-specific staining. This was my cytokeratins. Again, it was patchy positive, but definitely it is positive. You can see nice membranous positivity. So cytokeratin was positive. This was my synaptophysin. Again, it was patchily positive. This was SAL4. Positive or negative?
Weak positive.
Yeah, it is positive, and it can be positive in small cell carcinoma of hypercalcemic type. Apart from your germ cell tumors, SAL4 can be positive in a small cell carcinoma of hypercalcemic type. Okay, all these I have done, but I have to do this one specific marker for me to convince myself that it is small cell carcinoma is SMARCB4, which was called as INI1, right? So that INI1 should be completely lost in this tumor. What is the other tumor where INI1 should be completely lost?
Lung carcinoma.
Characteristically, I'm talking about when we talk about INI1, they hold a special place in only few tumors. So like small cell carcinoma, it will be negative. It has to be negative because they are associated with the SMARCB4 mutation. Otherwise, the old term was INI1. What's the other tumor where INI1 should be lost? And they are
Sarcomatoid tumor.
yes, atypical rhabdoid teratoid tumor. So this is a small cell carcinoma of hypercalcemic type. I just thought of sharing with you. So whenever you see cystic spaces in an ovarian tumor, and around like cells looking like sheets with small to moderate nuclei, moderate sized nuclei, think of juvenile granulosa cell tumor and small cell carcinoma of hypercalcemic type. Okay. Okay, this tumor can be in 7 months to 45 years. Nobody knows from which is their cell of origin because they are uncertain histogenesis. They are associated with SMARCB4 mutation. Also, please do TPS1 when you see those kind of tumors. It's also a small cell carcinoma of pulmonary type in the ovary, which is usually postmenopausal, and they are associated with TTF1 positivity. This particular tumor is TTF1 negative, and said and done, small cell carcinoma of ovary Whether it's hypercalcemic type or pulmonary type, they are not related to small cell neuroendocrine carcinoma, and they're highly aggressive tumors. Okay, that ends my session. If you are interested, I can show you one more case. If not, we will wind up here.
Yeah, one more case.
Do you want to see, or is that enough?
Others to tell me.
Continue, ma'am, please.
Only one more case. I am just looking, but I don't have any history though. Sorry about it. Case 2.
Okay, ma'am.
Case number 11. I just want to give you okay. This lady, sorry, I didn't even have the gross picture. This was last week I had this case, so I thought of sharing with you all. Okay, she had a huge ovarian mass, and grossly it did look like very endometriotic because it was lined by chocolate brown material in most areas, and they also had this polypoid growths within them. Some looked a bit papillary. Some areas were filled with mucin, not all. It was very like nodules of colloid material. Sometimes it just can fall off jelly-like material kind of thing. So the rest of the areas were clear-cut endometriotic cyst was clearly seen. So benign malignant, no doubt about neoplastic. Benign or malignant?
Malignant, ma'am.
Malignant. Definitely epithelial. So serous mucinous endometrioid clear cell.
Serous, ma'am.
Serous, are you? I'm saying it was also, the background showed an endometriotic cyst.
Endometrioid, ma'am.
Endometrioid.
Endometrioid, okay. That's what I thought as well, endometrioid, okay. So it did show that kind of pattern, but when I came here, can you see this architecture under low power?
Intestinal.
I wouldn't say intestinal, but it was quite
Mucinous.
slender papillae going in. Can you see that?
Yes.
Though I didn't see any goblet cells kind of thing, but this architecture, this is what I mean, like sometimes go with your instinct. Your instinct will definitely say something.
Papillary, micro.
Papillary pattern, it was indeed a papillary pattern.
Mitos.
It definitely looked endometrioid. There were areas that looked endometrioid clearly. And I also had this pattern. This made me think, because this pattern usually we will see in a mucinous. If you take a section and put it under, especially in mucinous carcinoma of ovary, right?
Pseudopapillary.
It's not the expansile pattern, but you'll have this kind of look. Even in borderline mucinous tumors, you'll have this look. But this area looked endometrioid, fine. And then I also had this area. What does this area remind you of?
Micropapillary, ma'am.
As I said, micropapillae, they have got that definitive feature. Do you have that elongated papillae here? Do you have that elongated papillae which I mentioned? It's a non-hierarchical branching. You'll have like big core and then this will go like slender papillae. This is not. But this feature, have you seen in any other epithelial tumors of ovary? This kind of edematous, edematous cores, small.
Serous papillary?
Serous, usually the papillae are not this edematous, are not this small. Okay, I'll go to some other areas. If you have this kind of nuclei that's protruding outside.
Trophoblastic type.
Not trophoblastic. We are still
Hobnailing, ma'am.
So hobnailing, yes. What kind of tumor you can get this hobnailing? Look at this.
Clear cell?
Clear cells.
Carcinoma. Actually, this is the papillae that occurs in clear cell carcinoma. Can you see this hyalinized papillae?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, they can have edematous cores and they'll also have hyalinized papillae. And this architecture, if you see, it's quite classical for clear cell carcinoma. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
In clear cell carcinoma, usually you see this kind of papillae. This is what we call it as tubulocystic pattern. This is the papillary structures that you see in a clear cell carcinoma. So can you get clear cell carcinoma in endometriotic cyst?
Not sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. It's quite common, and most common tumor that can arise in an endometriotic cyst is clear cell carcinoma. Again, it's an exam case, and you have to be ready with your brownies. You have to tell me the brownies the moment you get your clear cell carcinoma. They are also associated with paraneoplastic syndromes. They have a tendency to thrombosis, and you can also write about the immunomarkers. What immunomarkers will you request if it's a clear cell carcinoma?
Napsin A.
Napsin A, because I don't really believe in this HNF beta 1, because HNF 1 beta, it doesn't really work well. And Amaker again, if you do even in an endometrioid, it can pick up. It's quite non-specific. The only marker I used to rely on is Napsin. If you see the books, they'll clearly say, oh, the specific marker for clear cell carcinoma. So do you get almost all the cases of clear cell carcinoma with Napsin A positivity?
No, ma'am.
Of course, they'll say almost all. They'll never say 100%. Okay. Even though they say Napsin A positivity, remember clear cell carcinomas, they'll have patchy Napsin A positivity. You won't get the diffuse pattern of Napsin A. They usually tend to be patchy. Even if they are in focal, in some cases you can't really see everywhere. You know, it will be very focal, like 1 or 2 cells picking up. Still, that is considered positive. So you have to go with the criteria. As I said, you have to go with the morphology. The moment you think of clear cell carcinoma, even though Napsin A is negative, don't rely on immunos, because can be negative in a clear cell carcinoma. But the moment you see a histology pattern like this and you're convinced it's a clear cell morphology, just go with it and call it as clear cell carcinoma. Why? Because the endometrioid, we said it's grade 1. And I'm going to say this is, if I'm not calling this as clear cell carcinoma, the patient will be just treated as a grade 1 endometrioid and she won't receive chemotherapy, and she will just deteriorate in due course. So this is actually a clear cell carcinoma pattern. So to be honest with you all, I called it as mixed endometrioid and clear cell carcinoma based on that morphology. But as I said, that the papillary structure reminded me of mucinous, so I didn't want to take the risk. I wrote a comment there, immunohistochemistry is suggested to rule out, because I clearly mentioned that it could be an endometrioid carcinoma with mucinous differentiation or a mucinous carcinoma, and I requested for immunos. Especially when you're in a private practice, not all the patients will come and pay. So you have to be very careful, because we can't use immunos just like that. I have to wait for the patient. If the patient can pay, only then I can do immunos. And I'll show you. And this patient came back to do immunos. What is this? Is CDX2. Positive, negative?
Positive.
Positive.
Positive, ma'am.
Nuclear marker or cytoplasmic marker?
Right, both.
It's a nuclear marker. Okay. You can see a background like this, but it's actually a nuclear marker. See, look at the papillary pattern which I showed you. It was completely positive for CDX2. So what are the other markers the mucinous carcinoma will be positive for? I mentioned 3 markers. What are the CKs that will be positive?
MUC1.
Cytokeratin markers. Which are the cytokeratin markers?
720.
Yeah, 720. It won't help you to differentiate whether it's a primary or metastatic. So this is my CK7. Look how beautifully they are positive. Sorry, that's CK20. Where is my CK7? Okay, this is my CK7. They both, all 3 were beautifully positive. SAD-B2 was negative, and the tumor was unilateral. So I issued a supplementary after getting my immunos, and I called it as mixed mucinous carcinoma with clear cell carcinoma of ovary. Mucinous with clear cell carcinoma, to get this combination is quite rare, but in this case, it turned out to be mucinous with clear cell carcinoma. You can get endometrioid with clear cell carcinoma in an endometriotic cyst. That's quite common. And clear cell carcinoma in an endometriotic cyst is common. But mucinous with clear cell is not that common. And as I said, in this case, my NAPSINA was very focally positive, but still I have to call it as clear cell carcinoma based on the morphology. All right. Thank you so much for your kind attention
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
and contributing so much.
Almost more than 2 hours you've been really. I mean,
Any questions?
There are some questions. Why you get hemosiderin-laden macrophages in endometriosis?
A bit louder, please. I really can't hear.
Why you get hemosiderin-laden macrophages in endometriosis from one of the participants?
Really cannot.
Can't hear?
I can't hear.
Why do you get hemosiderin-laden macrophages in endometriotic cyst? That was the question.
Why in an endometriotic cyst? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. What happens when you have hemorrhage in the rest of your body? What happens? Who will come and engulf those blood?
That person is not there, I think, the one who asked question.
The one who asked question is not there.
It came in chat.
Why you get hemosiderin-laden macrophages in endometriosis? Because as long as it's functional, it just happens the same way. The blood cannot be expelled out. It will be still stay in the stroma, and it has to be engulfed by the macrophages and broken down into hemosiderin. So you will still have the normal phenomenon that occurs in the rest of your body in the ovary as well. So you do get hemosiderin-laden macrophages because of old hemorrhages.
That was the only question. Rest all have been, I mean, they said that's very interactive and excellent talks and informative presentation. Interactive, informative, those are the chat messages.
Oh, okay. Hope I didn't bore them with my cases.
No, it was really interesting, and it makes us all now think that we should do more and more of bitting.
Yeah.
That is one thing. Sampling should be very adequate, and we should look at all the areas and look for these kind of composite tumors which can be present. Even a smaller focus with a different morphology should be given importance.
Yeah, true.
Things, yeah. And of course, immuno, not all centers we have immuno here. We will, I mean, whatever is possible, definitely we will do, but always morphology is the first we should.
Yes, that's a good thing. Actually, I'm more of a morphology person and I don't do much immunos. Why I stressed a few things about immuno, as you go for exams, as you progress in future, definitely we are moving towards immuno and we are moving towards molecular. So it's better to know a bit about immuno and molecular at all times. You just go hand in hand. And I will always encourage, as I have already mentioned to Dr. Vijayashree, I'll always encourage you guys to take up at least one of the fellowship exam, because it actually strengthens your knowledge as you go along. So doing exams is always good.
The way of thinking is so different when you start doing exams.
And someone asked about Sertoli-Leydig cell tumor. I'm not sure who was it. Are they asking about Sertoli alone or Leydig alone? I'm not getting it right.
Both, ma'am.
As I said, sex cord stromal tumors, there are Sertoli cell tumors, there are Leydig cell tumors, there are Sertoli-Leydig cell tumors. Most commonly, we see Leydig cell tumors and Sertoli cell tumors compared to Sertoli-Leydig cell tumor. These Sertoli-Leydig cell tumor, they usually occur in elderly age group. And when you see them, you have to grade them as well differentiated, moderately differentiated, and poorly differentiated. Actually, I had one kind of such case on Frozen, and I have to make a diagnosis, and I dared to call it a Sertoli cell tumor, because if you're going to call it anything else, the treatment based on the surgery differs. So you have to be quite careful. And okay, moving on to Sertoli and Leydig cell tumor. Leydig cell tumor, they'll always present with hormonal manifestations. Unlike Leydig, Sertoli, usually they're incidental and asymptomatic. And sex-cord stromal tumor markers, such as inhibin, calretinin, melan A. Inhibin, calretinin, and melan A have to be positive in a Leydig cell tumor. If they are negative or patchy, think about Sertoli cell tumor. For Sertoli cell tumor, you have this particular marker, beta-catenin. It's quite specific. And you also got steroidogenic factor 1, but we don't have it, steroidogenic factor 1. So we rely on beta-catenin. And the electron microscopy will have the Charcot-Butcher filaments, which supports Sertoli Leydig cell tumor. Not that everybody does electron microscopy, even we don't do, but as I said, it's only for brownie points when it comes to exams. Like Leydig cell tumor, you can have these Reinke crystalloids and lipofuscin pigments that helps in your diagnosis of Leydig cell tumor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.